Hello and welcome everyone to our second week of FCI Live 2024. Thanks so much for being with us. We are on to our second session of today, which is the perfect board GM relationship. This topic is one we've had tons of requests for. So I reached out to Joel with 7 Roots, and he has put something together for us. I know that a lot of people have registered for this one and are excited for this conversation. Before we jump in with Joel, I did want to thank our champion sponsors, Columinate and National Co-op Grocers, who have made this particular series possible. We deeply appreciate it. Okay, so now I'm going to be turning it over to Joel, and I know that he does a good job of representing to folks his experience and so forth, so I'm not going to give a big introduction, but he has lots and lots and lots of experience in food co-op governance, and we're excited to have him here with us today. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, JQ. I was just going to say I'm a governance nerd. I guess I should say a little bit more than that, though, huh? So I'm Joel Kopischke. I'm with 7 Roots. I've been doing cooperative board governance since the late 1900s. So that's what the kids are calling it. So for many years. So thanks for coming today. Yeah, so like I said, I've worked with a bunch of different kinds of co-ops around the country, even in Canada, worker co-ops, ag co-ops, all sorts of stuff, and I'm a big old governance nerd. So I'm going to talk about the board GM relationship here today. Feel free to drop your name and co-op into the group chat. If you want to let us know what stage you're at, if you have a GM, maybe what your role is, if you're a board member, if you're a GM, if you're someone else. And I'll warn you, I've got some interactive stuff. So welcome. We got some more folks joining now. So I'll reiterate, you can put your name, your co-op, what stage you're in, what your role is, if you're a board member, a GM, if your co-op has a GM, or if you're in the process, if you have some other role. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, the perfect board GM relationship. Let's dive in here. Oh, I need to share screen, don't I? That's what I forgot to do. Okay. All right, can you see my screen now? Okay, excellent. All right, the perfect board GM relationship we're going to cover today is better understanding the board GM relationship, better understand what will help the relationship be successful, and identify some concrete things the board can do. This is not going to be wall-to-wall content. I built in a lot of time and ability for us to do some interactive stuff. I will definitely do a Q&A at the end, but if you have a question, if you have a comment or whatever, feel free to put it in to the chat, and if it seems appropriate, we'll tackle it in the moment. If not, we'll circle back to it when we get the time. So I want to start with something interactive. I want to hear from you all. How would you describe a perfect relationship? So let's see if anyone is weighing in yet. How would you describe a perfect relationship? If we've got a small enough group so far, if you can't get to your keyboard and you want to weigh in, you can unmute yourself. We'll see how that goes.
Kathy, it's not a trick question, but but any answer will fly here. So perfect relationship. All right, we've got open communication on both sides. Respectful, communicative, effective. Oh, as someone who went right to right to co-ops, not just any relationship, balance of operations and governance. So you can keep it real broad if you want to, think about any relationship you have, personal, work relationships, family relationships, what defines the state of perfection. Oriented around working towards common agreed upon goals. That's a great one. Both parties are listened to and heard. Clear communication. There's a theme here. Keep it coming.
Yeah. All right. While you're weighing in there, I will flip the slide to if this is different for you. So a perfect relationship or a perfect board GM relationship, there are things that are different about them. Feel free to weigh in on that as well. Okay. Well, you can continue to weigh in on that. And I'm going to tell you that I talked to a few experts. Actually a whole bunch of experts. So folks who have been or still are GMs and board leaders and other folks intimately involved with the board GM relationship. So these are some of the co-ops represented by the folks that I talked to. So there are actually more co-ops represented than just these. So when asking them about the board GM relationship specifically, they really, the words that I heard over and over, like survey says, trust and communication were the words that I heard over and over and over from those folks who have been living and breathing this. So we will talk about that as we get into this, because it's a unique relationship. And like any relationship, there's going to be trade-offs and compromises. But the unique aspect of this is that there's an element of partnership. The strategic leaders of the organization, the board and the GM, we're on the same team. One of the specific challenges is that, being a human and sharing power is a hard combination. And democracy is hard. Acting as a board is hard. Reporting to a board is hard. And all of these things will naturally entropy if not attended to, if we don't approach them with care and diligence. And in addition to the partnership aspect, there's also the oversight aspect. So we have both of those dynamics going on at the same time. So again, I want to hear from all of you as we talk about oversight. How many of you have had an amazing boss? And when you think about the best boss you've ever had, what would a perfect boss be like? What kind of qualities would they have? So again, feel free to put this into the chat, any of your thoughts. If you've ever had an amazing boss, trust me to do the work with autonomy, trust, and communication. Good one. That's a good callback. Communicative, no micromanaging, requiring trust, humility, able to admit errors, gives me great feedback I can actually use, trust. Oh, these are so good. So again, what I'm hearing is, boy, how about that? I had this slide queued up already. The experts in the room are saying it's trusted communication. So, all right. So let's look into those. Trust, empathy, compassion, and communication. Nice. So how to build trust. I've got a few thoughts here, and then again, with all of this, I want to open this up. I want to hear your thoughts as well. So the first thing I think of is the way to build trust as a board with your GM is be good at your own job. Do your homework on what a co-op is, understand that, understand what the board's job is and how to do it well, understand governance. Some of the GMs I talked to said governance policies sooner rather than later. Get those policies in place and then use them and hold yourself accountable. One GM specifically called out having a board chair with the courage to manage the board and hold members accountable. And I thought that was really important. And I'll even expand that because I believe it's not just the board chair who needs to do that. Everyone on the board needs to be committed to what's happening on the board, holding members accountable. You don't want to make your board chair the board police. Everyone should be able to hold each other accountable. And then, like I said, have and follow your own policies and monitor your own policies. If you don't take your own monitoring seriously, what does that say to your GM? If you are casual with your own monitoring, then you are encouraging your GM on some level to be casual with their monitoring, and that's not what we want. Monitoring can take some time and some effort, and I believe it's a good investment of that time. So, and this includes, this is one that I'll talk about, kind of those, what are some of the concrete things that we can do? Even going down to our committee level, have clear committee charters that lay out expectations and authority for the committee, and then have committee reports and have them written and turned in on time. And just getting into that habit, simple things like that, start to build a foundation and a culture. And I am really big on doing things on time. And I will say on time and lousy is better than late. You can always make something better. You can always say, all right, let's revisit this section that we think didn't get a good enough accounting for in this report. But I'm a huge fan of crappy first drafts. Get a lot. It's like, we've never done a monitoring report before. Great, do one. If it's lousy, great. You can always build on that and you can make it better. So don't let that get in the way of getting it done. What else about being good at your job? Run good meetings with good agendas. All that kind of stuff. Have a positive working relationship within your board, and that should extend out to the relationship with the GM. And then another one, just really important, is write things down. Do things written, so our expectations are written, so everything is clear. And that piece is going to transition right into the next bullet point here about being a good boss. Reggie already came in with a question: why is it difficult for a GM to report to the board? Well, there's a number of things that go into that. And I think I'll cover that a bit here with the be a good boss. We'll at least start to answer that question. So being a good boss means, understanding your role, having clear vision. That's one of the jobs of the board. Having clear expectations, again, written down, clear roles, delegate things cleanly. I had one GM who said, your board has been, for startups, your board has been hands-on and activist, and that got the co-op started. And that's great, but that's not governance. And so you need to be clear about the lane you're supposed to be in and what lane you want to be in and what lane you are actually in. And understand that it's not the board's job to fix things. And that the board should definitely have a mantra of do no harm. So those are some of the pithy things from a former GM. One of the big things about clear roles and delegation is I used to think delegation was a single thing, that that you're going to do this. That encompassed delegation. And what I learned is that it's really two things. It's you're going to do this and I'm not. And that second part is sometimes really hard, and it's really critical, because what we want is we want accountability, and we can't have accountability when there's shared authority. So if you don't delegate cleanly, or if you hold on to some of the control, and there's an example that I've used for many years, and one of the GMs that I talked to echoed it back to me. It's a football analogy. For those of you who aren't football fans, I apologize, but the whole idea is, the board is the quarterback, and we call the play, we set the vision, and we're going to hand it off to score a touchdown. Great. So we're handing it off to the GM, and we want that GM to, be fast, strong, agile, all of that. But we're concerned a little bit about handing it off. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to the ball still just a little bit. And I think anyone who's a football fan knows, yeah, that's not going to work. You're not going to be fast. You're not going to be agile. You're not going to be any of those things. And so being able to hand it off cleanly, and then have the accountability piece on the backside of that. And so, yeah, absolutely hold your GM accountable, and do it with kindness and respect. And if you can hold yourselves accountable with kindness and respect, you can hold them accountable with kindness and respect. It doesn't have to be punitive. A lot of us grew up learning punitive accountability. And so sometimes we slip into old patterns. So this might take some vigilance on our part to be sure that we're doing this in a kind and respectful way. I had one GM who came right out and said, for boards, support your GM 100% or fire them. They said, it's just too hard of a job. They said, support them or fire them. Those are really your only options. And supporting doesn't mean completely, hands off, but you do have to support them, give them the tools they need, hold them accountable. And then another big way you can build trust is prioritize. Understand priorities. And part of this is taking this enthusiasm and passion that you have for your board members and figuring out as a group, what of these things, what of these issues, what of these concerns are an individual concern, something that Joel is passionate about and interested? Is it something that the board is going to decide is also an important thing? Or is it just something that Joel is interested in? And so having good group process to take those individual ideas and hear them out, and then decide, oh, which of these are board priorities? Being able to do that, and being able to prioritize board time, being able to to set times on your agenda and hold to them. Say, we're going to spend 10 minutes on this topic. And then as we come up to that 10-minute mark, being really clear, it's like, okay, we're either done discussing this, or we're going to decide as a group, we're going to let our meeting run late by how many minutes, or we're going to take something off the end of our agenda and we're going to table that, or we'll table this, and just making conscious choices that prioritize everyone's time and don't let conversations run on and on and on. Time and attention are precious commodities. So being able to prioritize and knowing what's the big stuff, what's the medium stuff, what's the little stuff, will really help the focus and communication. One GM came in at this point and said, at the end of the day, the co-op is a grocery store that needs to be profitable in order to subsidize all the programs that we want to do. And the GM is charged with running a successful operation so the co-op can participate in the other community programs. And it's understanding that no margin, no mission, that the number one priority has to be, especially for startups, is the grocery store running well? You know, how are our sales? How is our profitability? All of that sort of stuff. So essentially boiling down to one of the big things you do to build trust is walking the talk. If you've got other thoughts on how to build trust, feel free to add those into the chat. And I'm gonna move on to the second prong here of trust and communication. What does good communication look like? And the first one is no surprises. So the board doesn't surprise the GM doesn't surprise the board. If things are happening, we know that they're happening. We've got enough of an open line of communication that we're not springing anything on anybody. So when the GM is aware of something, reaches out probably to the board chair and says, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. This thing is happening. I'll have a more full report, maybe tomorrow or the day after, that I'll send to the board, but, just want you to know the things like that, so that we don't have to process in the moment and we're not surprised by anything. And same with the other direction, for the board to the GM. For the board, speaking in one voice. The board has 5, 7, 9, however many members. Like I said before, individual ideas, individual passions, that's all wonderful and good. But then the board needs to decide, what does the board have to say on this topic? What is the board setting for expectations? And be clear in that. One of the famous stories on this is a GM that I was working with came to me and said, I just got my annual performance, and what they said is, 4 of the board members think there's not enough information in the monitoring reports, and 4 of them said there's too much information in the monitoring reports. And he said, what do I do? And I said, I have no idea. That's an excellent question. They have given you horrible feedback. They couldn't do that part about coming to consensus as a board. So they weren't able to do their job of being a board, speaking in one voice, and being able to give feedback that was clear, concise, and coherent. So some of the other things that this communication will look like is regular offline casual chats. I heard from every GM said this is really important to have a one-on-one with the board chair. One of them said weekly, one said every other week, some said once a month. Just have a regular casual check-in, so you're able to again, have that no surprises thing, and just be clear about, what are the important things that are happening right now? What's going on? Great, in the loop, fantastic. It can be short, it can be over the phone, it can be in person, a little coffee, cup of tea in the afternoon, something like that. Works great. One GM said that they made sure that they had a one-on-one conversation with every board member at least once a year. To just have that conversation and know that, you know, there'll be an opportunity to chat one-on-one. I think a big part of this too is to see each other as, you know, first as people who care about the co-op, and then the role that we're playing second. So we understand that we're on the same team and we're working for the same things. And I think it's super important to get to know each other as people. You know, one of the things I recommend for board meetings is that there's a short check-in. That there's a, you know, at the beginning of each meeting, just a short check-in so people can check in and say, hey, you know, dealing with this in my life right now, you know, work's a mess, whatever. A lot of stuff going on in my family. I'm here for the meeting. Great. We're reminded that, oh yeah, we're people doing this work together. And one of the GMs said that that is so critical because he said that's what co-ops are supposed to be doing, is putting the humanity back into the business of grocery. So, oh, one other piece here about like no surprises, speaking one voice, supporting the GM, is to praise and support in public and to criticize in private. We don't need to be airing dirty laundry. We don't want to call anyone out publicly. That is not likely to make things go better. So, which of course brings up the question about, you know, I'm focusing here on the boards because I'm assuming that that is primarily the audience that we've got for today is board members. Well, what about the GM? Obviously, there's a lot that the GM could do to make it work better or worse. And in fact, all of these experts that I've talked to, I've got tons and tons of stuff that they shared, and maybe some of it is very much aimed at GMs and what GMs can do to make this right. And so I think what we're going to do is we'll put that together into some form and share that out. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in the slide deck, you can put your email in the chat window, and we'll make sure you get a copy of our slide deck and all the great wisdom that we heard from board members, from GMs, former GMs, other folks who would know. So yes, there's a lot that the GM can do to make things better or worse. There's also a, you know, from stage and screen comes advice that, you know, directors say casting is 90%. And the same is true with GMs. Hire the right one. That'll certainly go a long way. That's easier said than done. But certainly the experience of the GM can be a big factor in whether things are successful or not. So be aware of that as well. And I've got a bit of a longer quote here from one of the GMs, that GMs of food co-ops are a rare breed. And in smaller co-ops, they're expected to be the store manager, chief financial officer, chief executive officer, HR manager, facilities manager. They sometimes handle marketing too, and they have to remain aware of industry trends, political winds, local road conditions. They often have boards that are less familiar with the grocery industry, possibly cooperatives or policy governance. So there are times when they have to ensure that their supervising entities know how to do their jobs too. That can be awkward and puts them in uncomfortable situations. So be kind, gentle, and supportive of your GM. They want more than anything for our co-ops to be successful and thriving, building strong and healthy communities with empowered employees who love their jobs. So please don't make their jobs any harder than they need to be. And with any relationship, it takes two to make it work. And a big factor, you know, we've been saying trust and communication. And I think if we were to add a third pillar to that, I think it would be respect. So here's another chance for you to add your thoughts to the chat if you'd like. What does mutual respect look like? How to show it, how to give it. One of the ways that I think about that is Dana put in asking, not assuming. I'll put a flip on that actually you can assume at times, but assume the best intentions on the other party. Assume that if you're a GM, assume the board is acting with best intentions. If you're a board, assume your GM is acting with the best of intentions. So, yes, assume positive intent. Thank you, Dana. So again, I think mutual respect, yes, asking, not telling, listening, having an open door. So again, we're circling back to a lot of good communication things and to trust. I think those three all go hand in hand. And then I guess the other thing to really think about here is what if it's not working? It's all well and good to talk about the perfect relationship, but if we don't have it, what do we do? How can we get there? We really need to course correct. Well, you can get counseling for your relationship. Bring in outside help. Might really help to gain perspective. Might help to have open conversations that will help the relationship. And a type of mediator, things like that can be very helpful. Zoom out, kind of go back to square one. Look at the outcomes, look at your ends. If you have end statements, look at your mission statement and really look, start with where we agree. And then have an honest conversation of, is everyone working toward the same goals? And again, some of these conversations might be difficult to have with if you've got 9 board members and 1 GM, especially if you've got a board members who aren't the best at the work and play well with others kind of dynamic, who may want to monopolize time in conversation or continue hammering home on a certain point. And so in that group, we can start to, reset expectations, though. Pose a question. How do we build trust? How do we show trust for one another? How do we want to be communicated with? Kind of go back to those core elements. And if they're not working, reset expectations there. Maybe I've been doing what I think is the best way of communicating with someone, and it's like, no, that does not work for me. It's like, oh, my intention is to be helping you here, and it's like, oh, it's not working. So have those questions and those conversations, and then you can create guardrails, guidelines, even if some of it is short-term, temporary, whatever. And it may help to have one person kind of be in charge of compliance, your compliance czar, who's to manage accountability with the group for short term. And that could be an outside person. A paid board coordinator can be helpful, reasonably low cost. That could be an option. And in terms of accountability, having transparency in that. So you don't necessarily want to call each other out and shame people, but if there's an element of great, I got everything I need from most of you, but Joel and Heather, I still need your forms. Please get those back in. Those were due 2 days ago. Great, thank you. And we can hold each other to best behavior. So I had one more kind of additional thought here on the board. You know, a big thing that I talked about is the board doing their job well is a big way to build trust. And I did come across this video on YouTube, um, and it really talked about, as this FCI Live we did maybe 2 years ago, I think, JQ. And it talked about the transition from a working board to a governance board. And so I think there's a lot of good stuff in there that would kind of act as a companion piece for this topic that we are on today. So and of course there's so much good stuff in the FCI online library there on YouTube, all of these FCI lives from over the years. So so that's pretty much what I had to present here. Here are some of the folks, the folks' names who were kind enough to take time and weigh in with their thoughts. So I'll give you a chance to look at that for a second. And I think we can open it up to a little Q&A here. So I'm gonna stop
I just
sharing.
want to say, Joel, as far as that list, did you say that the thoughts from those folks might be available by email, by request?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So
if you would like either the slide deck or all the words of wisdom from these folks, put your email in the chat and we'll make sure you get that.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks. That was just if you thought that looked like a superstar list, it really was. Joel talked to some pretty awesome people preparing for this session and wanted to make sure that didn't fly under the radar here. Because there's some good stuff in there. Hey, Joel, I've got a question that was posed in the chat a while back from Reggie. Can you share some feedback from board chairs regarding their efforts to build trust?
Well, I'm not sure I've got any great I've got any great stories. Sorry, what was that?
I said that might be a good group thing. You know, is anyone here having that experience or has had that experience from either direction? You know, if you're a GM or if you're board chair or in board leadership, something that's worked well for your group.
Hi, this is Valerie from Fredericksburg. I think allowing the GM to be part of our retreat and those kind of things kind of help to build that relationship, which then builds trust. So it's not the all to be all, but it helps.
That's a great one.
Yep. Thank you, Valerie.
You know what else I would say is those personal conversations you talked about, Joel. So just, you know, it's like anything, the better you know someone, the more you understand how they operate, why they do things the way they do. That helps to build personal trust, and then you kind of have a better sense of where folks are coming from when you're working together.
Yeah, and I think a big one for me, and it's one I admit I still struggle with, is to approach people with curiosity. You know, it's like, oh, this thing happened, or I heard this thing, and I get this emotional reaction to it, and instead of you know, jumping into that, is to just, you know, with like, oh, I disagree with that, is to be like, you know what, if I can approach first with curiosity and be like, oh, that's interesting, I wouldn't assume that would be the best approach for this. Can you tell me more why? And sometimes by doing that, I found out, oh, I've got a lot more in common with this person, and we actually do share the same end goal. and they've got a different perspective on how to get there. And so it's much easier for me to go, oh, okay, I understand that now, instead of just kind of reacting in the moment to something that gets me hooked, or gets me, gets the hair on the back of my neck to stand up, or whatever.
And if you have time for me to interject here, I would say also what I have learned over the years is that we also need to really understand each other's roles and not be afraid to push and pull at that line, because we get afraid to have convos. Like, I think it's okay. Like, I think that we go, oh, that's the board's job, and that's the GM's job. And, and then everyone goes and vents in their corners. Instead of me being able to go in a board meeting as a GM, I've been a GM, people go, can I ask why you feel you need that report? Is that if I say that more frequently and you get used to, that's not confrontational. That's us discussing our job. How is that going to help you do your job? Help me understand so I can do a better job of it, or even suggest a better way to meet it. And vice versa, that the board can say, and it doesn't, like, building trust is actually learning to work the relationship and not get your hackles up. And so I see boards avoid the line instead of being like, but that's your job as a board and a GM as equals, to kind of push pull that line and say, I'm trying to understand what you need, you're trying to understand what I need, and it's okay for us to work through that. That's not an argument. And so I guess for me, it's been a lot of learning not to be so sensitive and to have those convos, knowing that we have clarity and full respect for the divisions of our roles. And if we don't have that, get clear, because we need to be able to have those convos.
Thank you, JQ. Yeah, and to piggyback on that, in terms of like having those conversations, the board and the GM have their separate lanes, and we can still, the board can have a conversation about things that are operational. If there's a concern there and there's a lack of understanding, it's like, great, let's have that conversation. And then usually the way to build trust is, a lot of GMs are going to balk at that conversation initially, because what's going to happen is everyone's going to jump in there, and the board members are going to say, well, why don't we do this? And why don't we do this? And this would fix it. And this would, whereas instead, if we say, okay, let's get in the sandbox and let's play. And Joel's going to get excited, and Joel's going to say, you know what we should do? And that is not the board directing the GM. That's just Joel being excited, and he will work on his language and work on being better at that. But we're going to just acknowledge we're going to be imperfect about this, but none of what we're going to do for the next 10 minutes has anything to do with the board directing the GM. So let's find out more about this. And so we start to have the ability to have strategic conversations about important things, not minutia. We don't want to waste the board's time. We don't want to waste the GM's time with, why the color of the bathroom is painted the color it is. But important strategic items, we can build those skills to have those conversations, where the GM might be like, oh, they're messing with my stuff. And the board might not be the greatest, but it's like we get through one, and at the end of it, it's just like, okay, great. I think we understand that better. No change to any of the policies, any of the directives. Great. And then the GM will go, oh, that wasn't so bad. And so then the next time we can have another conversation that might be potentially awkward in that space, and we can really learn to communicate as partners, as the strategic leaders of the organization. Susie, I see your hand is up. You got a question or comment?
I just wanted to kind of build on that. Hi, Tony. Hi, Valerie. Yes, two of my board members here. And I discussed this recently, is part of that dynamic is the fact that there are 9 of them and there's 1 of me. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming to approach, the board, and, kind of, you feel outnumbered. I think that's a big part of the struggle is, well, there are 9 of them and 1 of me, and how do I approach this without feeling kind of real small? And if anyone has recommendations on how to approach that.
Yes, Thank you, Susie. That is so great to call out. That is one of the struggles with the board GM relationship is this, in the midst of a normal power dynamic, you've got this, at least 5-1, usually more 7-1, 9-1, sometimes even more. And so being sure that that doesn't become overwhelming for the GM. And some of the ways to achieve that are to really work on that speaking in one voice and having the board get the clarity and having the discipline to not be throwing everything at the GM at once, but to say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. What are our priorities here? Great. And then taking that to the GM. And one of the things that I've done before is, we talked about what are the qualities of a great boss. One of the things that we did in that other FCI Live that I talked about is we brainstormed how to fail making the transition from working to governance. And that's always a really fun brainstorm to do. It's like, how can we ensure this goes down in flames and is as bad as possible? Well, you can do that too with about being a boss. How can we ensure that we're just a horrible boss? And when there's 9 of us, and it becomes pretty clear when you do that, it's just like, oh, well, I tell them one thing and they tell them something else. And all of a sudden it's just like, oh, do we kind of do that? And reminding yourselves of that dynamic can be really good for the board to be sure that that perspective is present there. Any other questions or comments? We've got about 5 more minutes here.
Hi, Joel and Heather. This is Dana from Chicago Market. This is not a specific thing to boards or board GM relationship, but I'm going to stick I think I'm going to stick, if it works right, a little screenshot in the chat. And it's something that I absolutely love whenever I've talked to people about building trust. It's called the trust equation, and it came from a consulting group whose name I've forgotten at this point. But it talks about how trustworthy is an actual equation. And I really love that it talks about there's things on the, top, and then there's the things on the bottom. It's your credibility, your reliability, and your intimacy. And in this case, they talk about being close to somebody. So what we were talking about with personal relationships and things like that. It's those 3 things all added up together. And then the one thing that can kind of take away from the equation is self-orientation. If you're just in it for yourself or that sort of thing. So I love this equation and wanted to share it with everyone just because it's a little gem that I've picked up and try and pass out wherever I can. But I also have been playing a little bit since you've been talking about how this plays into the board, being trusted, or the GM being trusted. So that was something interesting I was just playing with in my head.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dana, for sharing
This
that.
is wonderful. Thank you.
I will I will include that along with our slide deck and the info from folks from my experts, all of their wisdom. So anyone who gives us your email address, I'll include this image of the trust equation as well to be sure that that is included with everything.
And I will try and get you accreditation as to who it belongs to.
I've been doing a quick search here too, and I can't see it. It's tough to find. So
it's sort of been spread far and wide, but there is an original. I think it's called the Trusted Advisor. So I'll look that up and see if I can get it for you.
great. All right. Any other questions or comments?
I'm going to ask you,
Well,
Joel, about something.
Yeah, sure.
if no one else is, which is board space, because I think one of the things that's tough for new boards, new to having a GM, is you want your GM in your board meetings and your retreat, but also learning to speak with one voice takes space to practice. And so, and I have my thoughts on it, but you've advised more boards than me, and I'd really like to know your thoughts, because I see startup boards struggle to practice responding with one voice once they've got a GM, and these are real, actual emotional conversations and situations and things they have opinions on. So where do they get that practice? Is that done in front of the GM? What do you think?
So there's a couple of tools that I like to use to help develop that. One is a simple reflective tool. I'm not remembering the name of it right now, but it basically boils down to 3 questions: what, so what, and now what. And you can do this at the end of any board topic on the agenda. Is just take a minute afterwards and just be like, okay, so what just happened? What did we discuss? What were the high points? Great. So what? Why does that matter? And now what? Are there action items, future implications? Taking a couple minutes to do that as a board, what you're doing is you're developing that speaking with one voice on a small thing. Oh, we just talked about the annual meeting. Great. What were the main talking points? What were the conclusions? Great. So we practice doing that. And it's a great tool to use during meetings to be sure that we're aligned, because we can have a broad range of conversations. Say, great, what are the priorities here? Are we aligned? Great, now we can move forward. And it also really helps for whoever's taking your meeting minutes to know how to summarize what just happened. And that's a great tool for building that consensus voice. That's the best one I can think of. I thought I had another one in mind, and it's gone now. So I guess another way of looking at that too is when you do have to speak on something, it's usually easier to have one person draft your first crappy draft and then say, what really has to change about this, to get that buy-in, because trying to get 9 people to write by committee, it's, is famously hard. So trying to get 9 people to craft a coherent single statement is difficult. But if you work together, and have one person start with a draft, it's easier to say, oh, okay, I can generally get behind that. Great.
I asked because I think sometimes it's hard for board members to learn without talking to one another. And so some boards will have a Slack that's just for them, like the GM isn't on, or they'll take 15 minutes in a board meeting without the GM in the room. But the purpose is to say, okay, so how did that go? And also, like, I had this concern raised. Did anyone else did? And everyone can go, no, JQ, that's a you thing. You always harp on this, drop it. The board doesn't share your concern. Or to say, okay, there are 3 of us that actually kind of heard that. Did anyone else hear that? Do we want to say anything to the GM or not? But just a little space to like practice what rises, and when you just need to be told that you just need to take a chill pill and it's okay, and that's your personal pet thing. And so I think there's a role for the board to coach each other in this, not in front of the GM. And I wondered what you thought.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's great to have the GM involved in the big stuff when you're doing a board retreat, stuff like that. Maybe not there for the whole time though. Right. Maybe you've got some time to work with just the board, have those conversations, so that the board can, be sure that they're operating well, communicating transparently with each other, and also not having to share all 9 ideas with the GM, but just coming with the one group of ideas that are shared.
I'll be quiet now. Someone else can ask the last question.
Anyone for a final question? All right. Well, I will once again say thank you all for coming, and thank you to all of the experts who took time to share with me, and by extension to share with you all of their wisdom. So back to you, JQ.
All righty. I want to say thanks.
Wait, I've got one more question in the chat. JQ, I'm so sorry. I just
go
saw
for it. Go for it. I'm going to start sharing my slide, but go ahead.
Reggie with one more. Have you observed any cultural leadership style differences as a factor in the GM board relationship? What a good one.
Wow. Yeah. I do think yes. Uh, so I think a leader who can cultivate group responsibility, who can cultivate not monopolizing time, not preaching, but having voice, having everyone in the room have an equal voice, not allowing the loudest person to take up the most space, um, being aware that the introverts might have some real wisdom to share, and making sure that there's invitation for folks into the conversation. Um, I think those kind of dynamics lead to a board that works really well together, and also is a good cultural piece to work with the GM. And again, those things of, encouraging open communication, encouraging curiosity, those kinds of things, when they're encouraged at the board level, will definitely show up in the GM relationship as well. Anyone else have any thoughts on that quickly before JQ wraps us up here?
I guess the only thing I would think of is sometimes there are cultural differences, whether, in different parts of the country or in different styles of workplaces, and sort of being mindful at the outset of the relationship where any given member of the group is coming from in that respect. Like, hey, how are you used to talking about sticky topics? Or how was this handled in your previous position? I imagine kind of getting that stuff out on the table prior to it becoming an issue is a great way to set the stage for success.
Yep. And of course, there are tons of studies out there about group dynamics and traditionally marginalized communities, including women, not having equal seat at the table, not having equal voice, um, and things like that. So having a facilitator who is also aware of those kind of dynamics to be sure that we're hearing from all the voices in the room is very important.
All right, we are at the top of the hour. So we're going to thank Joel so much for this session. It seems it was an incredible conversation. People got a lot out of it. And we got to have so many people with so much experience in the room through the process that you used to develop this. Thanks so much. I really loved that. And I already shared with you guys the survey is super critical. Please do take it. It means so much to us and to Joel. It helps us keep this session free. So it only takes 1 minute. So please do go fill it out. And we've got more terrific sessions coming tonight, and tomorrow is going to really be a lot about finance, how to accept grants, if a loan should be part of your capital stack. We have a whole bunch of that. And then our last 2 days are really about, our last day and a half is really about community organizing topics and how to use community organizing techniques to really build your cooperative. So I hope you all will join us. And if anyone wants to stay for a minute or two after, we will allow for that, but we're gonna wrap up our recording. Have a great day.